I don't come to give you answers. I come so you can no longer lie to yourself. God. Before we begin, here's a small ritual. Write in the comments one word that accurately describes your current state. Sign it, and let's get started. They were fishermen, tax collectors, outcasts, broken men with ordinary lives and haunted minds. But something happened, something that split their lives in two. The before and the after. They heard him. Jesus didn't teach. He penetrated. His words didn't persuade, they shattered. They didn't ask for belief. They dismantled everything. After him, they were no longer the same. Their consciousness no longer belonged to the past. What were those words? Why did they work then? And why do they still burn, like poison or like medicine, even now? These weren't sermons. They were keys to the psyche, to the unconscious, to the shadow. Jesus didn't speak to the mind. He rewired it. Through short phrases, through paradoxes, through explosions of meaning that obliterated the false self. When he said, "Whoever wants to save their life will lose it," it wasn't a poetic metaphor. It was a direct assault on the ego, on fear, on the inner controller whispering, "Just survive, just don't die." But those who heard him, they couldn't go back. Because if we're being honest, most of us are just surviving too. We wear images of ourselves. We play roles. We collect spiritual knowledge like ornaments on an empty body. We quote Jesus, but don't hear him. We talk about love without ever learning how to love our own shadow. But back then, they dropped to their knees. They fell silent. They broke. Because his words hit the deepest wound. And from that wound, power emerged. Real, wild, untamed. The kind of power that doesn't ask permission to exist. You're searching for that too. You've been through therapy. You've heard 1,000 tips. You've read the books, taken the courses, prayed, tried, but the emptiness stayed. Because deep down, you know, nothing truly transforms you unless it cuts to the soul, unless it breaks the patterns, unless it destroys the old you. That's what his words did. Not the way they're quoted, the way they burned inside the one who actually listened. That's what we're unlocking now. Not through religion, through psyche, through the mechanisms Jesus activated, through shock, through the collision with the shadow. By the middle of this video, you'll hear the very words that reshaped reality, that stripped everything false and gave birth to something raw, something real. But not everyone can handle it. It sounds harsh, but these words either heal you or destroy you. They don't leave space for half-alive living. If you're ready, we go further. But from this moment on, nothing will stay the same. The men closest to him weren't saints. They were impulsive, jealous, insecure. Some were violent, some were cowards, some were liars. But after walking with him, hearing him, something irreversible happened. They weren't simply inspired. They were dismantled and rebuilt. From frightened humans into something that can only be described as dangerous in the best sense of the word. Dangerous to lies, to fear, to illusion. They became unrecognizable. And it wasn't because Jesus performed some ritual over them. It was because of what he said, how he said it. When he said it, his words didn't decorate their minds. They invaded. They disrupted the self-image so violently that their entire sense of identity collapsed. And that collapse, that was the beginning of their real power. Think about this. Peter, the same man who denied Jesus 3 times out of fear, later stared death in the face without flinching. Thomas, the skeptic, doubted everything until one encounter made him fall to his knees and call Jesus my Lord and my God. Matthew, a tax collector hated by his own people, ended up writing a gospel that shaped the future of the world. These transformations weren't gradual, they were abrupt, radical, and triggered by something deeper than inspiration. They came from direct confrontation with a consciousness so pure it exposed every false layer inside them. Jesus didn't motivate, he pierced. And those who stayed, who didn't run, were remade. Most people today read his words like poetry, gentle, abstract, but they were anything but. His words destabilized. He wasn't trying to make them feel better. He was trying to wake them up, violently if necessary, because only that level of disruption could access the hidden parts of the psyche we're all terrified to face, the parts we buried, the rage, the shame, the hunger, the pride. Jesus didn't avoid those parts. He spoke directly to them, and that's why those words still work. Not because they're sacred in some mystical way, but because they hit the raw nerve of what it means to be human. He spoke into shadow. He spoke into self-deception. He spoke into the exact lie we build our personalities around, and it broke people, not in a way that destroyed them, in a way that revealed who they actually were before the masks. If this already strikes something deep, subscribe to this channel, not for content, but because the more people hear what really lies beneath those words, the more we tear down this fake version of growth we've all been sold. And don't skip the Telegram channel. That space is for what we can't always say out loud here. If this feels like it's not just a video, but something you've been needing, leave a comment right now. I no longer run from pain. Let's see how many of us are ready to stop pretending we're fine. What Jesus did wasn't religion. It was psychological detonation, a total reset, and it's coming. The words that shattered the men around him. The words that still have the power to shatter you, if you let them in. What made Jesus truly different wasn't just what he believed. It was how he altered the inner landscape of those around him. He didn't give people something to think about. He short-circuited the very structure of how they thought. He bypassed their intellect, went straight through their defense mechanisms, and planted truth in the deepest layers of their unconscious. He didn't build their confidence. He shattered it, and that's what made space for something more powerful to emerge. The modern world talks about mindset shifts, positive affirmations, healing the inner child. But Jesus did none of that. He exposed the lie and left it bleeding in front of you, forcing a choice. Cling to the illusion, or let it die. His presence alone triggered disturbance. Crowds followed him for comfort, but left disturbed. They wanted peace, but he gave them conflict. Not external, internal. He was not gentle with the false self. He didn't negotiate with the image people had built of who they thought they were. He tore it apart. He had no interest in reinforcing identity. He was here to demolish it. That's why the transformation of his disciples was so total. They didn't get smarter. They didn't get more balanced. They were reborn through internal collapse, through confrontation with what they didn't want to see. And that kind of confrontation changes everything. His superpower wasn't miracles. It was his ability to speak into the fracture line of the soul, to find that one place in you that no one touches, the place you cover with busyness, religion, therapy, even personal growth, and pierce it without warning. He didn't guide people step by step. He dropped spiritual grenades into their inner world, and the explosion was never clean. It left blood. It left questions. It left silence. But in that silence, something new began to grow. Not an improved version of them, but a different consciousness altogether. When Jesus said, "Follow me," it wasn't an invitation. It was a test. Would you leave everything? Not just your job or family. Would you leave your identity? Would you walk away from your certainty? That's what it meant, and that's what his disciples did. That's why they became something else. They didn't just change behavior, they lost the self they'd always been and stepped into the unknown without a guarantee. That's not faith, that's surrender. And surrender is the only doorway to real power. We have tamed Jesus. We've turned him into a symbol of comfort. But the real Jesus was dangerous. He was confrontational. He didn't let you stay asleep. His words weren't soft. They were sharp. He weaponized language in the most precise psychological way. Each sentence a scalpel, each phrase a mirror. And what you saw in that mirror wasn't pretty, it was real. That's why so many walked away. That's why some hated him. That's why those who stayed were never the same. If you're still here, it means you're not afraid to be cut open. And that's exactly what's coming. Because the deeper we go, the closer we get to the words themselves. The ones that changed everything. The ones that ripped through Peter, broke Thomas, woke Mary, and left Judas unable to face himself. And if you let them, those same words will find your fracture too. It wasn't just what Jesus said. It was when and how he said it. His words weren't casual. They were timed like detonations. In moments of fear, in silence, in betrayal, he dropped phrases that cracked the shell of human identity. During the Last Supper, the night before everything fell apart, he looked into the eyes of men who still didn't fully understand what they were part of, and said, "One of you will betray me." That single line sent shockwaves through the room, not because of Judas, because everyone questioned themselves. It was a direct hit on the false certainty we all carry, the belief that we know who we are. That moment shattered their internal image of loyalty, morality, even self-trust. It exposed how fragile identity really is. Then he said, "This is my body. This is my blood." For modern ears, that sounds symbolic, but to them, it was something else. The line between the physical and the divine collapsed. Spirit and matter were no longer separate. It was a total redefinition of reality. Not theology, perception. He was forcing them to see what you touch, what you eat, what you bleed. It's not outside God. It is God in form. That kind of statement doesn't expand your thinking. It wrecks your entire structure of belief and replaces it with direct experience. This is how their minds broke open, not through logic, through phrases that made reality bend. And then the most intimate shift. I no longer call you servants. I call you friends. Not a gesture, a complete collapse of hierarchy. He was saying, there is no distance anymore, no gap between teacher and student, no roles left to hide behind. That single sentence pulled them into full accountability. You are not here to obey. You are here to awaken. These weren't just powerful statements. They were psychological triggers that ended the old self. Forever, the words Jesus spoke were not meant to be understood. They were meant to be experienced. They were not there to be analyzed. They were there to interrupt. When he said, "Whoever wants to be first must be last," he wasn't suggesting humility as a virtue. He was confronting the ego's obsession with status and control. He was declaring war on the entire system of self-centered ambition. In that one phrase, he flipped the internal compass. Suddenly, the path to strength ran straight through weakness. The path to power ran through surrender. The highest became the lowest. And that paradox doesn't land in the mind. It lands in the bones. Another phrase, unless you become like little children, you will not enter the kingdom. This wasn't about innocence. It was about unlearning, about returning to a mind that doesn't yet cling to identity. Children aren't pure because they're naive. They're pure because they haven't yet built the complex armor of personality. What he was saying was brutal in its simplicity. Your so-called maturity is your prison. Your intelligence, your plans, your image, they keep you locked out. To enter something higher, you have to return to something raw, not childish, unfiltered, exposed. Even more devastating was when he said, "If your eye causes you to stumble, gouge it out." People think he was being metaphorical, but the point wasn't mutilation. It was intensity. He was saying, if something inside you is keeping you blind, cut it out, no matter how precious it seems. Your perception is shaping your reality. If you're seeing through distortion, then nothing outside you will ever feel right. That statement wasn't about morality, it was about psychic surgery, removing the part of you that refuses to see truth, that clings to the illusion, that would rather live comfortably numb than face what's real. This is why his words caused people to either follow him to the end or turn away completely. There was no middle ground, because every sentence he spoke forced a choice. Stay asleep or wake up. Stay safe or become real. Stay intact or be transformed. And transformation, in his world, always meant something had to die. Usually the very thing you thought you couldn't live without. He didn't just talk about love. He said, "Love your enemies." That's not spiritual advice. That's an invitation into internal war. Because to love your enemy, you have to face the parts of yourself you've demonized. You have to find compassion where there was once only vengeance. You have to disarm the inner critic that feeds off hate. And that's the hardest form of love, the one that forces you to sit with what you hate in others and realize it lives in you too. That's not philosophy. That's ego death. These words weren't designed to comfort. They were designed to crush what's false. And from those ruins, something unshakable would emerge. That's why his disciples could face torture, death, exile, and not flinch. It wasn't because they believed harder, it's because they had already died internally. The false self was gone. What was left could not be threatened. The question now isn't whether his words were powerful. The question is whether you're ready for them to do to you what they did to them. Shatter the image, collapse the persona, strip away the protective layers, and reveal the raw, unfiltered core. That's where the shift begins. And once it starts, there's no going back. The reason his words still work today is because they were never aimed at behavior. They were aimed at structure. Not the structure of religion or culture, but the structure of identity itself. When Jesus spoke, he didn't just challenge what people did, he revealed the invisible systems underneath why they did it. That's why his words are timeless, because the core of the human psyche hasn't changed. We still build lives on fear. We still cling to images. We still run from pain and dress it up as success. His words bypass all of that. They go to the root. Modern self-help focuses on improvement. Jesus focused on death and rebirth. Not metaphorically, psychologically, the death of the false self, the death of the image, the death of your story. That's why people don't really want to hear him. They want comfort, not fire. But fire is exactly what he brought. And fire doesn't ask for permission. It burns, it consumes, and then it clears the space for something real to grow. This is why his teachings feel offensive to the ego. They are designed that way. They have to be, because if the ego feels safe, nothing changes. His words were crafted not to entertain or even to teach, but to destabilize, to disorient, to break the illusion of control. He didn't offer you tools to feel better. He offered you a mirror and then shattered it in front of you. And in the shards, you either saw your truth or turned away. Today, those same phrases are read in churches and quoted in posts, but very few let them in deep enough to actually do damage. That's what makes the difference. Are you reading them with your intellect or letting them slice into your patterns? Because that's what they're for. Not inspiration, incision, a way to cut through the numbness and expose the system running your life. The human shadow, everything you suppress, reject, disown, is exactly what Jesus aimed at. Not to shame you, to free you. But you can't be free from what you won't face. That's why his words dragged darkness into the light. And that's why people fled. Because being seen hurts, especially when the one seeing you isn't judging, but inviting you to step out of the cage you didn't even know you were in. Let this land clearly. His words were never meant to make you better. They were meant to make you new. And the path to that is through fire, not comfort, through contradiction, not clarity, through surrender, not strategy. That's why it still matters now. Because if you're still stuck, still circling, still exhausted by all the healing that leads nowhere, maybe you don't need another answer. Maybe you need to let something die. And that's the exact place where transformation starts. Not where you add more, but where you let go of what was never real. His words make that possible. Not because they're beautiful, but because they're dangerous. And if you're brave enough to let them touch you, really touch you, you won't just feel different. You'll be someone else entirely. If you strip away the layers of myth, ritual, and interpretation, what's left in the core of Jesus' message is raw, practical wisdom. Not lofty ideas, but instructions for how to live, clearly, powerfully, and with full presence. 2,000 years later, his advice still slices through confusion, because the mechanics of the human psyche haven't changed. We still fight the same battles: fear, greed, shame, control. And his words still offer the most direct path through. First, do not worry about tomorrow. This isn't just spiritual fluff. It's a weapon against anxiety. When you obsess over the future, you disconnect from power. Worry weakens action. Jesus was pointing to the neurological truth. The mind creates suffering by projecting fear forward. When you ground into now, into breath, body, truth, your nervous system calms. Decisions sharpen. Relationships deepen. Focus returns. This one shift can heal your mental health and free energy you've been wasting on imagined futures. Second, give and it will be given to you. This isn't about charity. It's about flow, about unblocking the hoarder mentality that clogs abundance, whether it's time, energy, or money. When you contract in fear, you stop the current. Jesus knew that generosity isn't loss, it's circulation. Giving opens channels. You create value, and value returns. Not magically, but neurologically, emotionally, socially. In your work, in your finances, in your relationships. If you want more, release more. Third, let your yes be yes and your no be no. In modern terms, be direct. Set boundaries. Speak cleanly. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you betray yourself. Jesus was calling for radical alignment. Clarity in speech reflects clarity in self. This isn't about being harsh, it's about being whole. When your word has weight, people trust you. When your boundaries are clear, respect follows. In love, in business, in daily life, this one shift changes everything. Fourth, forgive them, for they do not know what they do. This is not weakness, this is freedom. Carrying resentment locks your energy in the past. Jesus understood trauma before we had the word for it. He knew people act from pain, from programming, from blindness. Forgiveness isn't approval, it's release. When you let go, you stop letting the wound define you. Your health improves, your emotions stabilize, you get your life back. Fifth, seek first the kingdom within. That's the root. That's the system override. Jesus wasn't pointing to heaven. He was pointing inward, to the inner state where alignment, truth, and peace begin. When your inner world is grounded, your outer world starts falling into place. Focus less on fixing circumstances. Focus more on cleaning perception. Because how you see is what creates what you see. These aren't abstract morals. They are precision tools for reality. And they still work because they speak to the root of every human challenge: identity, fear, projection, misalignment. If you practice even one of them with honesty, your life will begin to shift. And now, the choice is yours. If this hits something inside you, subscribe to this channel. Let the algorithm bring this truth to others who are ready. And join the Telegram. It's where the masks come off and the real conversation begins. If something opened inside you, write in the comments, "I accept my shadow." Say it not for the likes, say it for yourself, as commitment, as starting point. Let's build a space of people who are done running. This is only the beginning.